The wave pool kept running. 11:18 a.m. Monday, June 9, 2026. Cascade Springs Aquatic Resort, Branson, Missouri. 187,000 square feet of indoor water attractions across 2 levels, a wave simulator the width of a football field, a lazy river circuit that took 7 minutes to complete, 12 water slides, a zero-entry family pool, and a lodging complex with 412 rooms. The parking structure held 1,100 vehicles. On a Monday morning in early June, nearly 900 guests moved through the turnstile banks. Families from Oklahoma, Arkansas, Kansas, and Illinois pushed strollers across the blue-tiled concourse. 47 agents from Homeland Security Investigations Kansas City and the Missouri State Highway Patrol Tactical Operations Division were already inside. They entered simultaneously at 11:18 a.m. through 3 points: the service corridor access behind the wave pool filtration plant, the administrative wing stairwell on the building's north side, and the loading dock. None of the guests on the lazy river circuit saw any of it. Behind the filtration plant, in a converted equipment corridor accessed through a steel door marked maintenance, no guest access, 21. 16 of them appeared in active missing person databases across 3 states. The wave pool ran through the entire operation. By the time the last arrest was made in the parking structure at 11:31 a.m., the guest count on the main aquatic floor had reached 1,040. This is the account of what happened inside Cascade Springs, what enabled it, and what finally ended it. Retention Cont Point, a 30-hook resolution tease. 5 days earlier, on June 4th, Megan Ellsworth was working the 3-to-8 shift on the north observation deck above the wave pool. Ellsworth was 24, a junior at Missouri State University studying recreation management. She'd been hired 11 weeks earlier through the resort's summer college rotation program. 16 seasonal staff per year from hospitality, programs across Missouri, Arkansas, and Kansas placed into lifeguard coverage during peak season. 12-week rotations renewable once. Standard pay. Ellsworth had worked a similar facility the summer before. She knew what a busy Monday afternoon looked like. The 11 a.m. entry wave, the post-lunch rush, thing toward the water. She'd developed a scanning method by her first week. Gate near concourse, water edge near concourse, gate. 30-second cycles. Mechanical by now. At 3:47 p.m., on a routine left-to-right gate scan, she caught the wristband. The wrist access gate was teal and orange, not blue and white. The distinction mattered because of something specific. In October 2025, Cascade Springs completed a partial rebranding, new signage, updated logo, full changeover of guest credential materials from teal and orange to blue and white, effective November 1st. Any guest with a teal and orange band after that date was supposed to be redirected to guest services for a reissue. Ellsworth knew this because of a memo she'd found in a break room during her second week. She was borrowing a storage cabinet near the North Lifeguard Station and found a discarded onboarding binder from the previous year. Inside, between outdated schedule templates and an old evacuation diagram, was a staff communication dated September 19, 2025, directed to all seasonal staff, noting the November wristband changeover and the reissue protocol. It was routine, not required reading. She read it once and left it in the binder. On June 4th, she wasn't speaking. She wasn't looking at the water or the slides. She was walking 2 steps behind an adult male Ellsworth had never seen at the facility. No staff badge, no guest lanyard, no visible resort credential. He was using the turnstile scanner. The gate operator, a seasonal hire named Damien who started the previous week, was occupied with a family question at the far end of the bank. He wasn't watching the gate. The man that didn't angle toward the water, the changing rooms, or any guest amenity. They walked toward the rear of the aquatic floor. Toward the maintenance corridor door at the back of the building, a steel door Ellsworth had been told during orientation connected to the filtration plant access zone. Staff only. Magnetic lock entry. Not a guest door. They went through it. The image captured the teal and orange pattern, the timestamp of the gate camera visible in the background, and the adult's partial silhouette moving toward the door. She didn't act immediately. She completed her shift. She said nothing to anyone at the resort. That evening, from her car in the employee lot, she called the adult's description, the direction of travel, and the specific door. Then she said something she hadn't consciously formulated until she was saying it aloud. She'd seen that same rear door used twice in the... She hadn't reported either of the previous two incidents. She hadn't been certain. The wristband was the one thing she could document. The tip reached the HSI Kansas City field office at 10:43 p.m. Retention point, 4 Stakes Bend. Special Agent in Charge Dana Reyes received the alert at 6:50 a.m. on June 5th. She assigned 2 forensic analysts to the cross-reference task before 7:30. Protocol was standard for NMEC referrals. Compare physical descriptors, age range, and regional travel window against active missing person entries in the National Crime Information Center database and NSMEC's registry. The first cross-reference return came at 9:17 a.m. By 2 p.m. that afternoon, the return showed 16 in recent months. 3 states, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Tennessee. The oldest case opened in October 2025, 8 months prior. The newest had been filed 9 days before Ellsworth. 3 states. 1 maintenance door in the back of a family water park. Reyes escalated immediately and requested a sealed warrant package before close of business. The investigation now faced a constraint that would shape every decision for the next 4 days. Cascade Springs was a fully operational commercial venue, not an abandoned warehouse, not a rural compound. A tourist destination receiving hundreds of guests per day, staffed by 200 employees across all shifts, with surveillance cameras on the main floor, the concourse, and the parking structure. Any investigative action visible to management would be visible to whoever was operating the corridor. The cover that made the corridor possible was the same thing that made the investigation dangerous. A building with 1,000 people in it is noise. A child, an unknown adult near a staff door, is someone's uncle, someone's contractor, someone's employee you've never met. High-traffic venues provide something a remote property can't. Structural invisibility. Reyes assigned 2 undercover operatives to enter the resort as day pass guests beginning June 5th. Protocol was passive documentation. Log who used the rear maintenance door, identify all non-staff adults accessing the service corridor, note any child showing behavioral indicators inconsistent with voluntary attendance. No contact. No approach. No communication with resort employees. Over 3 days of observation, the operatives logged 9 uses of the maintenance door leading to the filtration zone. 7 of the 9 involved adults not wearing staff uniforms. 3 children. Of those 3, none made eye contact with other guests. 1 was carried into the door in a position inconsistent with normal transport. 1 stopped walking entirely for approximately 40 seconds before the accompanying adult directed her forward. The 3rd moved quickly and without visible distress, but departed in a direction that didn't lead to any guest facility. The operatives filed reports within an hour of each shift end. The reports were on Reyes's desk by morning. Parallel to the physical surveillance, HSI's financial analysis team had been assigned to Cascade Springs vendor contracts on June 5th. They found the anomaly before noon on June 6th. A company registered as Aquatic Chemistry Solutions of Missouri held a pool chemistry services contract with the resort since April 2020, 14 consecutive months. The monthly contract value, $47,000. Industry standard rates for pool chemistry services at a facility this size, $9,000 to $14,000 per month. The overage was $33,000 to $38,000 monthly for 14 months. Total above market payment, between $462,000 and $532,000. The contract had been approved and renewed without modification by the resort's regional facilities manager, Curtis Elam, a 41-year-old Kansas City resident, with oversight responsibility for 7 resort properties across Missouri and Arkansas. Elam's personal financial records, accessed under sealed warrant on the morning of June 6th, showed irregular deposits totaling $63,000 across an 11-month period. Each originated from a shell company registered in Clark County, Nevada. Montclair Facilities Consulting Group LLC. The deposit pattern was consistent. One transfer shortly after each facility's modification approval at a resort in Elam's portfolio, one at the start of each calendar quarter. Montclair Facilities Consulting Group LLC had no documented business activity, no website, no registered clients, no filed tax documents beyond initial formation paperwork. Its registered agent address was a mail forwarding service in Henderson, Nevada. The investigators pulled modification approval logs for all 7 properties under Elam's supervision. 2 additional sites showed approved partition requests in mechanical spaces, both submitted within the same 6-month window as Cascade Springs, both approved without site inspection. One property, a resort and conference center 41 miles from the Arkansas border in a town called Hollister, held a pool chemistry vendor contract with a related entity, Clean Systems of the Ozarks, incorporated December 2024 at the same Clark County registration address as Montclair Facilities Consulting Group. Different company names. Identical registration infrastructure. Identical approval chain. The operation wasn't limited to one water park. I spent time going through the case file documentation, and one detail kept standing out. The approval chain at Cascade Springs wasn't merely inadequate. It was consistent. Every request that made the hidden corridor structurally possible, the partition approval, the vendor contract, the quarterly renewals, moved through the same single individual without independent verification for 14 months. That kind of consistency isn't negligence. It's architecture. Retention knot point, 50% mid-roll hook. The financial investigation widened faster than the physical surveillance. By June 7th, a picture emerged. A trafficking transit infrastructure embedded inside a functioning regional hospitality chain. Not grafted onto one rogue facility, but threaded through an approval structure that spanned multiple properties and had been operating long enough to establish routine. The joint operation order was authorized the same night. 47 agents across HSI Kansas City, the FBI and Missouri State Highway Patrol Tactical Operations would execute a coordinated operation at Cascade Springs the morning of June 9th. Timing was the problem. Standard doctrine for enclosed facility operations calls for minimum civilian presence. Pre-dawn entry, pre-opening skeleton staff. Supervisory Special Agent Lorena Vasquez, designated site commander, filed the initial operation plan for a 7 a.m. breach, 90 minutes before the first guest arrived. The tactical team pushed back with a specific argument. The individuals identified as holding access to the filtration corridor, Hartwick. 2 additional card holders identified through surveillance footage. At least one of the recurring adult visitors documented by the undercover operatives weren't at the facility during pre-opening hours. Their access patterns, documented across 3 days of surveillance, placed them consistently inside the building between 9 a.m. and noon. A pre-opening breach would secure an empty corridor and allow every critical individual to disperse before any agent could reach them. There was a second factor. Okafor's delivery schedule, cross-referenced with loading dock access logs, showed a consistent Monday morning window between 10:30 and 11:30 a.m. Miss that window, and the cargo van wouldn't approach the facility. Miss the van, and whatever it carried wouldn't be recovered. Vasquez revised the operation plan. Peak hours. Monday morning. 900 civilians in the building. Every operation that takes place in a facility full of families involves a calculated risk that can't be reduced to formula. Here's the one without a clean answer. The mitigation was speed. 3 simultaneous entry points. Primary objectives reached in under 10 minutes from breach. Perimeters sealed before any general alarm. Vasquez made the call. The outcome would suggest she made it correctly. What no one had fully calculated was the obstacle that appeared at 11:04 a.m., 14 minutes before scheduled breach. One of the undercover operatives on the aquatic floor transmitted an unscheduled alert. An individual logged in the surveillance database as a recurring maintenance visitor was moving toward the loading dock exit. No cargo. No apparent purpose. Moving at a pace inconsistent with routine building circulation. The operative assessed it as a possible advance warning. though no communications intercept from the prior overnight monitoring had captured any outbound tip. Vasquez pulled the surveillance feed. The individual was visible moving through the maintenance passage toward the dock. She didn't wait for a second assessment. She moved the breach order forward by 4 minutes. The transmission went out at 11:14 a.m. Retention comp point. Microfinal 21 min. At 11:18 a.m., the operation began on all 3 fronts simultaneously. Team 1, 7 HSI agents approached the service corridor access adjacent to the wave pool mechanical room. Entry required a duplicate magnetic key card. 48 hours before the operation, the surveillance team created a controlled opportunity to briefly access a card held by one of the non-staff corridor users, a managed encounter that produced a working duplicate without the cardholder's awareness. The duplicate had been confirmed operational in a simulated environment the previous evening. The door opened at 11:18 and 37 seconds. Team 2, 5 agents, 2 in plainclothes, moved through the administrative wing stairwell to the 3rd floor conference suite. The resort's on-site operations manager held a standing Monday morning meeting in that suite. He was taken into custody at 11:19 and 40 seconds. He didn't resist. He didn't appear surprised. Team 3, 12 agents plus Missouri State Highway Patrol perimeter units deployed to the loading dock approach and the parking structure's exit lanes. At 11:22 a.m., a white enclosed cargo van, consistent with Okafor's registered vehicle, approached the loading dock entrance from the service road behind the building. The driver was detained at the entrance gate. He was the only occupant. The individual the undercover operative had flagged at 11:04 was located on the parking structure's 2nd level at 11:26 a.m. He was moving toward a vehicle registered to a name unconnected to the resort, unconnected to any vendor entity, and absent from any prior surveillance record. Agents detained him before he reached the vehicle. Inside the wave pool mechanical room, Team 1 moved through the first access door into the service passage connecting the plant to the filtration zone. The passage was approximately 60 feet long, lit by a single fluorescent strip. The door to the partition corridor was at the far end. What agents found inside didn't match the approved modification specification on file. Gerald Hartwick's March 2025 modification request described a single partition dividing one large storage bay into 2 areas. What the team entered was a space reorganized into 3 distinct compartments using prefabricated wall panels. Materials consistent with commercial, event staging construction, installed without permits, without inspection, without any documentation in the resort's official modification records. The chemical storage units referenced in the original application were stacked against the far wall, occupying roughly 1/8 of the total floor area. The remaining space had been restructured entirely. The first compartment held supplies, food containers, water, basic sanitation items, spare bedding. The second held what investigators later described as staging materials, items associated with transport logistics. The third compartment was at the rear, behind a second prefabricated wall with a basic door frame. Team 1's lead agent opened that door at 11:21 a.m. 21 or lying on mattress pads on the concrete floor. The compartment measured approximately 20 by 15 feet, 300 square feet. No windows. A single ventilation inlet pulling recycled air from the mechanical room. 1 battery-powered lantern. Temperature at time of entry, 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Most couldn't immediately communicate with agents. Medical personnel entered the corridor at 11:31 a.m. The initial assessment documented dehydration, sleep disruption, and acute stress responses across the majority of the group. Several showed signs consistent with extended confinement. The 6-year-old from Muskogee, Oklahoma, matching the oldest case in the cross-reference, missing since November 14, 2025, 197 days, didn't speak when agents entered. She looked at the door. Then she looked at the floor. The wave pool 20 meters away was still running. 7 additional pediatric response units from 2 Branson area hospitals responded to the on-site corridor through the maintenance access route, not across the public aquatic floor. Beginning at 11:52 a.m., At 12:04 p.m., a resort PA announcement in a calm administrative tone advised guests to exit the water and proceed to the main concourse. Most guests would have assumed a water quality issue, a routine safety check. They wouldn't have known about the room behind the filtration plant. Retention point, last 60s payoff plus open loop. Identification of the 21 check protocols, and continued through the following 48 hours. 16 were matched to active missing person cases within 2 days. The process used photograph comparison against case file images, dental record cross-reference, and next-of-kin confirmation calls coordinated through NCMEC, the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation, the Arkansas State Police, and the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. For 16 families, the call came within 48 hours. For 5 of the 21, the timeline extended. 2 required DNA confirmation procedures, with results returned within 5 days. 3 had no entry in any national missing person database. Their disappearances had never been formally reported by any adult with legal standing. No case numbers. No photographs on file. No open investigations in any state. As of this account, those 3 children whose disappearance generates no formal report represents a persistent structural gap in the national tracking infrastructure. This case has put that gap back under active policy review. Whether that review produces any change remains to be seen. The 7 individuals arrested on June 9th face charges in federal court. Gerald Hartwick, 47, overnight maintenance director of Cascade Springs Aquatic Resort, was the first individual detained at the first corridor access door at 11:18 a.m. He faces charges of conspiracy to commit sex trafficking, facilitation of trafficking, and use of a facility in furtherance of a trafficking offense. Prosecutors have indicated the initial filing represents a partial charge list. Additional counts are under review pending the broader investigation. Terrence Okafor, 44, operator of Aquatic Chemistry Solutions of Missouri, was detained at the loading dock entrance in his cargo van at 11:22 a.m. Federal prosecutors have stated publicly that the van contained materials consistent with continued operational use of the corridor. Okafor faces charges of conspiracy to commit sex trafficking and interstate Curtis Elam, 41, regional facilities manager, was arrested at his Springfield residence on the afternoon of June 9th. A residence search produced documentation at Cascade Springs and records tying him to the Nevada Shell Company. He's been charged with conspiracy, facilitation, and receipt of proceeds from trafficking activity. Federal prosecutors have indicated additional charges are expected as the investigation into the Hollister property advances. The remaining 4 individuals include 2 persons with no formal resort employment connection, facing charges in 3 federal districts, 1 seasonal maintenance worker whose involvement remains under active investigation, and the individual apprehended in the parking structure, identified as a transport coordinator for the network, facing conspiracy and interstate transportation charges. Aquatic Chemistry Solutions of Missouri has been dissolved. Clean Systems of the Ozarks, the related vendor at the Hollister Resort, has been placed under federal asset freeze. The investigation into that facility is ongoing. No charges have been filed there as of this account. Forensic review of the 2 additional modification approvals at other resorts in the regional chain continues. Megan Ellsworth gave formal statements on June 5th and June 9th. In subsequent interviews, she said she didn't think of herself as a whistleblower when she made the call. She looked at a wristband, recognized it was wrong, and dialed a number. She'd been at the resort 11 weeks. She'd found a memo in a break room during week 2. She read it once. Here's something worth saying directly, because most coverage of cases like this won't. The question of whether Hartwick and Elam should face prosecution isn't complicated. They should. The more uncomfortable question is why a resort operating under a regional chain's oversight structure went 14 months without a single in-person inspection of approved modifications, why a vendor contract exceeding the market rate by more than 300% renewed without triggering a review, and why the only person who looked closely enough to make a call was a 24-year-old on a summer rotation who happened to read a memo that wasn't required reading. This failure is institutional before it's individual. Hartwick and Elam exploited an approval structure designed for operational efficiency, not verification. The same structures exist at similar facilities across the country right now. Not in every facility, but in enough that the question isn't whether something like this could happen again. It's how many times it already has. Will independent audit requirements for resort facilities follow from this case? Comment yes or no, because the regulatory response here will matter more than any individual sentencing. Number. They exist in the space between the systems designed to protect them, in a category the infrastructure was never built to find. The resort is closed. The corridor has been sealed. If you want us to follow the Hartwick, Okafor, and Elam prosecutions through every federal hearing as the docket develops, subscribe. Every plea, every filing, every sentencing. We'll cover it. The network inside Cascade Springs has been dismantled. The conditions that made a trafficking corridor viable inside a family water park have not been addressed. 21 children were found. The ones who were never reported are still waiting to be named.